We'll go ahead and get started, folks. First of all, I just want to reintroduce ourselves. So I'm Bill Rasplica, and was asked to work with WASA on the Directors Academy, so honored to do so. With me this morning is Mary Ellen Parrish from OSPI and Helen Peroff from WASA. And you have already heard from Helene, so. So I wanted to start off by just revisiting what we talked a little bit about at our first meeting. I think Helene talked about Simon Sinek's work with starting with why. And so the why is this core belief of the business or of your school district. And also as a special education administrator in that district, why? What's your purpose? Why are you there? Why did you want to do this job? And the provision of special ed services is legally mandated. So that's probably one of the whys. But also the other why is that you're serving students and families who have special needs. And the school district receives funds for those purposes. And so part of the how then is that how does the school district, how do you as the director fulfill that core belief? And one of the ways to do that is to understand how your district receives both federal and state funds. You're the caretaker of those funds, and it's your responsibility to see that they're spent in a way that benefit the students that are under your charge. So then also, how do you decide to budget funds in a professional way, in an ethical way? We talked about ethical decision-making last time, and in a legal manner that is going to benefit the students and their families. And so then there's also a what there too, is that what are your priorities based upon student need and the funding that your district receives? So having said that, we'll get started. I'd like to welcome Mary Ellen Parrish. She's the Special Education Program Supervisor at OSPI. When I asked her the other day, is there anything in particular that she'd like me to say about her, she said, I'm just a humble state employee. And so that's how I'd like to introduce her. But there really is nobody in the state who knows more about special education funding than Mary Ellen does. And so she's just a real treasure and resource for us. So thanks, Mary Ellen, for doing this. So we'll go ahead and we'll move along.
So now I'm in the driver's seat?
Yep, okay. You are.
So. Well, good morning, everyone. I don't know about where you are and what the weather's like, but driving in this morning, there was so much frost on the road that I thought it had snowed. It is very chilly here in Olympia this morning. My topic is fundamentals of special ed funding. Today's training, it will be general information to help you understand the finances of the program. And of course, any action taken should be coupled with a thorough review of the federal laws and regulations, guidance letters, bulletins, and reporting forms. So you'll want to be introduced to your friends at the Special Ed Division. I'm one of 20 people that work in our office. Our work is to ensure that the special ed program and the related services are provided on behalf of 145,500 eligible 3 through 21-year-old students in Washington State. That's a big number and a big responsibility. Our office assists you in these endeavors by providing technical assistance and professional development. We, of course, engage with the stakeholders. You're probably aware that there's a special ed advisory committee that and helps develop policies for our state. We also administer supervision. You'll see that in the Washington Integrated System of Monitoring. Our WISM folks, the program review folks are involved in that, as well as dispute resolution. And finally, we allocate the federal funding. And additionally, we manage the safety net program. So my involvement with the special ed office is basically in the finance area. I'm involved in forecasting, legislative reviews, maintenance of effort, and many other of the chores, the fiscal chores or fiscal tasks that are related to managing the program. I've been at OSPI now for, 18 and a half years. And so I thought, what do I really want to share with you as perhaps new directors or developing directors? And I think that it's paramount that you understand the funding formulas. And then I wanted to touch on some of the questions that I'm asked most frequently over the phone. This is a very, very complicated and complex topic, and I could talk for probably days about special education funding, but we only have an hour, so let's move along. You do know, I'm sure, that there are two sources of funding for the special ed program. There's the state funding, which flows to the LEAs, and if that's a new term to you, it means, well, what does it mean? It means local education agency. We send the state funding out to the district through the apportionment process at the School Apportionment Financial Services Office. Does all the allocations and sends the money out, and it's recorded in the school district as revenue 21 and 4121. And then we have the federal funding, which each district must apply for through a Form Package 267 in the iGrants program, and that comes to you as revenue 6124, and that funding is spent in program 24. So the two revenue sources, one of the biggest, well, there are several differences, but one will flow through monthly. The other one is only drawn down as a reimbursement for your expenditures, and that is the federal program. It's important that you understand the state special education funding, because that is probably 3/4 of your budget for Program 21. What are the drivers of the state funding formula? It's your resident special ed enrollment times the district's basic education allocation times the applicable multiplier. So there are, as you know, when you report your enrollment, there are 3 categories of reporting. There's the birth through 2, the 3 through pre-K, and the kindergarten through 21. And the multiplier is different in 2 cases. You can see there that the multiplier for your 0 through 2 is 1.15 times the basic education allocation. For the 3 through pre-K, it's 1.15 times the basic education. And for the kindergarten through 21, the multiplier is 0.9609 times the basic education rate. And this is the reason I asked you to pull your 1220s, so you'll be able to look at those and see how those 3 reporting populations all have the multiplier applied to them separately on your report 1220. It's also important to know that the district is capped at 13.5% of their basic education can be counted as special education. Counted and funded is what's important to note. So if a district has a special education funding percentage or a percentage of, say, 16 and a half, they're not getting the state allocation for the difference between the 13.5 and the 16.5. That's going to make more sense when we look at the state funding formula on your report 1220. So this would be a good time to go ahead and get that report in front of you. And it will clarify what I have just said. So you see on line A, everybody have their report 1220s, I hope? Need a little feedback here. Okay, so we've got the enrollment reported for, now this is the state funding formula. Yours is just yours, but this is the big picture. We've got the age 0 through 2 reported. We've got 3 through pre-K. We've got K through 21. Going on down, we say that statewide, our special ed percentage is 12.16%. And any district that is 13.5 or below is funded for every single student. Now, moving on down, let's go down to line I. Well, mine is, are you able to see your basic education rate? That's on line H. Okay, now what's going to happen is that basic education rate is multiplied by the number of students reported eligible for services times 1.15 for those students that are 3 through pre-K. And down, whoopsie, let's go back, all the way down to H3, you would see your K through 21 enrollment times 0.9609 minus the federal integration to show you how much funding you're receiving for your K through 21 population. Any questions about this? I'm thinking that all of you meet regularly with your business manager and you're all well versed on this. But in case you aren't, know that every single month you can hit on this link, state funding formula, and go out and check your allocation. Was there a question? Okay, let's move along.
Put them in.
Okay. Now we need to talk about the federal special ed funding formula. What are the drivers? Well, Congress is the first driver, and that's why you find all of us that are associated with federal programs holding our breath as we wait for Congress to finalize the budget and let us know that yes, indeed, there will be funding for IDEA in the coming year. And we also watch to see, has the funding been increased? So the drivers are, first of all, the Congress's allocation, then the public and private enrollment, and that is what we get at the Washington state level is our portion of this total allocation based on our enrollment. So sorry about that. This is not only is I'm hearing this is your first webinar delivered this way, it's my very first delivered this way. So here I have for you the IDEA allocation model, and this you're engaged in right now. So you know that you're going to report your enrollment to OSPI. In turn, we will report it to the U.S. Department of Education. The U.S. Department of Education will have the enrollment for everybody in our nation, and we will allocate to us based on relative population. When we get our share, we will then allocate it out to the districts. And on the next slide, I have the formula, which may or may not be of too much interest. It's wading into the weeds, but basically you get 85% of your funding based on population, and 15% of that allocation is figured based on the free and reduced rate. And going back here where it's IDEA allocation is underlined, if you were to click on that, it will take you out to the allocations that are posted on the web for your district and all the districts in the state. Okay, well, whenever we talk about funding, it always makes us wonder, is there enough? And so what I wanted to show you is currently in our state, we have not had sufficient state and federal funding to cover all the expenditures associated with the special education programs. So on the top line here, we have revenues, 3121, 4121, and 6124. That's the state and federal revenues. On the bottom, we have displayed the program expenditures for programs 21 and 24. So you see that in 15-16, we had a shortfall. In 16-17, we had a shortfall. And in 17-18, at this time, I know what the revenues were. We don't have the final on the expenditures because we have not received all the information from all the districts regarding their total year-to-date or their total expenditures for 17-18. But I am fairly comfortable in saying to you that I predict another shortfall, which takes us to the situation we are in. You may know that in the 2017 legislative session, our superintendent of public instruction was asked to conduct a study of special education funding and safety net process. These instructions were also delivered via the Education Task Force for our legislature. And what we were to address was the consideration of a change in the funding formula. Well, over the next year, the 17-18 year, there were many meetings held by the work group discussing the different models of funding. And our goal was to develop a funding formula, a proposed funding formula that would acknowledge the delivery of services in different settings and would also incentivize districts to promote a more inclusive setting in the general education classroom. We're going to
take this down.
We're going to stop for just a minute. We've become aware that there is a question in the chat box, so let us go to that. And
so actually, I think it's Dave McKellar that has a question. Dave, what's your question? You'll have to unmute your mic.
Good morning. Welcome. Thanks for being here today and giving us this information. I'm still trying to figure out, we budget for a number and we submit that to OSPI for what our reimbursement or our monthly enrollment will be. So in our case, 661 for the months of September through December. My understanding is in January, we start receiving the funding for actuals. My question is, that number is generally always higher than what we budget for. It seems to be even more so this year somehow, so we're trying to figure that out. So my question is what happens from September through December if our numbers were actually higher than what we budgeted? Is that brought forward or caught up, or how does that work, I guess?
I should have paused and told you that. Dave, you're correct. The months of September, October, November, and December you received funding on your report 1220 based on the budgeted numbers prepared and submitted in the F-195 and the F-203 budgeting process. Now, the good news is that in January, you start being paid on the year-to-date average. So all of that, if you will, the higher numbers that actually existed in September, October, November, and December, excuse me, actually October, November, and December will be averaged into the reported number for January, and you would, in your case, most likely see a increase in funding. Does that make sense?
That does. Thank you very much.
So it's year-to-date average starting in January. Any other questions that we may have missed? Okay.
And Dave, remember to mute your mic again. Or somebody needs to mute your mic.
We've got the sounds of children in the background. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so now we are moving on to the work of the legislative work group. And I think it's very, very important that all of you are aware that there is a current discussion going on about a proposed special education multiplier. So what it would do is, instead of the 0.9609 for up to 13.5% of your population, the proposed multiplier would address every student reported for special ed funding K through 21 based on their direct minutes of service and the instructional setting. And the proposal that we have examined would increase the multipliers, or the multiplier would change over the period of the next 3 bienniums and would result in sufficient funding to at least reduce a school district's reliance on levy funding to fill the current gaps that we looked at in the slides a few minutes ago. So it's important to keep in mind, this is a proposal at this time. We have asked for data from every single district in the state so we can run models. It will very much be a topic of discussion with the legislature. Special ed funding is very high on the list of priorities for our superintendent and our agency in our budget request to the legislature. So with the proposed state funding formula, what would happen is the resident students in each band of service would be multiplied times the BEA rate, and then further multiplied by the tiered multiplier for that particular band of service. The template that has been built has been customized so that by entering the district's county district number, the BEA rate for the next 6 years would automatically populate. And moving on, again, this is the current model being discussed as of today. Keep in mind, with legislation and with all the interest groups we have, this I do expect further changes to the model, but this is where we are right now. You can see we've got bands of service that are basically equivalent to the LRE placements of 1, 2, and 3 that you're familiar with. We've broken them down further, though, into bands of service in each of those settings. We've also acknowledged that there are separate day schools for many districts, send students out of district to specialized programs. We've also accounted for students placed in residential settings, and then the homebound and hospital-bound students. So again, that would be in the tiered multiplier. It would be your BEA times the number of students in the different settings. And you can see, as I said earlier, the multiplier is predicted to have some changes within the bands as over the next 3 bienniums in order to account for services and minutes per week of service and for all these populations, and ultimately, as we said earlier, help reduce the district's reliance on the levy.
Pause for a question.
How about if I get through this and then we'll pick up. I'm aware there's one more question in the chat box. Let me get through this and then I'll pick those up, okay? So here we have, again, it's hard to envision this, but I know that we did send the multiplier out to everyone. So remember, we've got the BEA times the students times the tiered multiplier. And I've got here before you a sample of one of the districts that is participating. And you can see that over the 3 bienniums, the funding does increase based on projected enrollment and shifts in the time in program and setting. So this district would enjoy an increase of funding. This particular district has 992 special ed students, if I recall correctly, and a special ed enrollment of about 12.63%. Next, I have another example of a district participating today, and this particular district is over the 13.5% cap, but with this model, there would be funding for all students based on time in program and setting. So this district would, if this model were to pass, would be receiving funding for all of the students. And as you see going across, there also is a increase in funding. So again, this is a proposed model, and I want you to be aware because it will certainly be an ongoing topic with the legislature starting in January. That's when the legislative session starts. It's a 105-day session, and I know education is receiving priority attention. Okay, let's stop here. Are there questions?
Okay. Hello again. I think Betty Lopez, you have a question? You can unmute your mic. Are you there, Betty? You need to unmute your mic.
This is Helene. Betty's mic isn't working, so let me share with you what Betty's comments and concerns were.
Okay,
and
great.
So she appreciates the idea of a tiered multiplier, however, has the lack of infrastructure with certain IEP platforms been considered a limiting factor. And so one product in particular that I believe many districts use, IEP Online, does not currently easily calculate direct minutes across instructional settings. It only does for services that are provided in special ed and not general ed. Secondly, also there are expensive services that are not direct services like para support, equipment, and other SAS. Would that be assumed to be captured through safety net?
Okay, let's first talk about the IEPs, and I'm aware that IEP Online and PGS are working towards revisions that would allow for the capturing of all minutes per week of service. So should this proposal prevail, that is something that would need to be put in place. Also, I didn't mention it, but this system would require some revisions to the special ed reporting P223H form, which would then need to have multiple bands on it based on minutes per week of service. The next question is, Betty, yes, supplemental aids and services such as the paraeducator that you were inquiring about should be reported as delivering services in this model. However, if the cost for that student did exceed what we know now is the current threshold for safety net, the student could be considered for safety net funding.
Okay, thank you. We'll move along.
How are we doing for time?
It is 9:34.
Okay, so now we're into the section where I considered the questions I'm asked on a fairly regular basis and wrote those down. I hear a lot from districts wondering, how do I know if I'm receiving funding for my student when the student is served out of the district? And I wanted to show you, and thank you, Hawkinson, for being my example here, that yes, there's a way you can check. And that is to look at your report 1220 starting in January, and if a student is being served out of district, it should be shown on your report 1220. And the way to determine is to look at the bottom section that I'm showing you here. And those of you who know you have students served out of district, such as Arlington, Longview, Hawkinson, Seattle, or Central Kitsap, you could look at your last year's 1220 that I asked you to print and look down below on your 1220. It's about 2/3 of the way down, and you'll see enrollment by serving district. And the serving district will have reported that they are serving one of your students. If you don't see that, then you would want to contact the district and ask them to be sure to report it on the P223H and to file a correction so that you would get credit for all the months in which the student was served there. So that's an easy solution. Next question that I've asked so often, for some reason, I've become associated with safety net. I don't quite understand it, but I have. So where are the safety net forms? Ta-da, we have those posted for you. Again, if you click the link under safety net, you will have access to all of the forms that are going to be used this year. We have yet to update the worksheet A because we have not received all of the year-end data. But as soon as that becomes available to us, that will be updated and ready for you. And we have not yet posted the community impact forms. I believe they're ready to go. Just it's a big agency, and sometimes we have to wait in line to get our postings on the web. Now, I'm going to touch just ever so briefly on safety net. In case you haven't seen the bulletin or are not aware that the forms have been posted, the due dates are March 15th and May 10th. March 15th is for high need individual. May 10th will be for community impact and any additional submissions for high need individual. The threshold this year is $31,761. I expect to hear the sound of applause when I tell you that redacting is not required this year. The committee will be reviewing high need applications first, then community impact. And it's important that you know that the district must exceed the 13.5% special ed enrollment cap before applying for community impact. Any questions about safety net?
Yep, Mary Ellen, can you just verify, confirm that there are some who were told that it was February 15th and not March 15th? So can you verify which is it, February 15th or March 15th?
I can absolutely confirm that it's March 15th. There was quite a low-level revolt about the February 15 deadline, and so we extended to March 15th, and we will be releasing that update, and it is absolutely, folks, March 15th.
Right. So good to know that there will be something that will go to all of the field about that date.
It might, if you are not registered to get any updates on SafetyNet, there's a site on the SafetyNet webpage where you can register to do that. And I would advise you to do that because it's a big, big process. There's over 3,000 applications come in from about 140 districts in the state. So tune in.
You got lots of applause for that, Mary Ellen.
Okay, okay. Thank you, thank you. Anything else on SafetyNet? Okay, we'll move along. The next question I'm asked. And perhaps you're aware of it now, or perhaps it's just been quietly handled by your business office, but this is the time of year in which we check to see that each district has passed maintenance of effort. Maintenance of effort is the federal requirement that says that you must expend the same amount as you did in the prior year in which you passed either on spending the same amount in either the local and state funds or local and state per capita or local only or local per capita. I know this is a bit confusing and it's pretty deep in the weeds. Let me assure you that most of your districts deal with this in the business office, but we'll confer with you about it. I have the link to the template, which is used to calculate whether or not a district passes maintenance of effort. And let me also assure you that because our state funding continues to increase every single year, that rarely does a district fail maintenance of effort unless there has been a huge, huge change in their program. And that could be something like starting an ALE program and then discontinuing, or that's about the only reason I can think of off the top of my head. But here on this slide, we have the 4 tests. And once they're conducted by the district, then they'll come to our office and we will again test them using the template that is displayed on the prior slide. And should there be a failure, it's been my job to work with the district. And what I found is There are times when the cost of a high needs student or the cost of several high needs students could have been the reason for the initial failure, but that discontinuing a program because a child has moved or no longer needs the services is an allowable exception, and so the district does not fail maintenance of effort. I know this is sort of muddy, but any questions on this? Hearing none, we'll go on to the next frequently asked question. Aha, proportionate share. Notice again that I have linked you to a very comprehensive guidance published by the Office of Special Ed Programs that will address virtually any question you can think of. So how does proportionate share work? Well, the LEAs, that should have an apostrophe, the LEA's total federal flow through is divided by the total number of public and private enrollment reported for the district. And then that is multiplied by the eligible children enrolled by their parents in private schools. And that will give you a factor that can be used for proportional share. So I would expect it's going to be, around $1,500, something like that, per student identified. Now, here's where people seem to stumble. They don't realize that when they have identified private schools within the boundaries of their district, they need to meet with all the approved private schools. They need to conduct authentic consultation, and then based on that consultation, the LEA decides what services to offer. I have observed that for the most part, I see a lot of speech language pathology costs. I see sometimes some counseling, and I see that in some cases, if no direct services were needed for students, that training is provided. All of these are acceptable uses of proportional share. Okay, proportional share money, as in all of your federal allocation, has a life of 27 months. So, if you are a district and you have reserved $3,000 for proportional share in 17-18, and nobody needed services and no funding was spent, that needs to be carried forward as available for the 18-19 school year. Now, by, let's say, June, July, if that funding has not been used, again, because there were no students needing the services, nor were there any trainings provided, then the district can absorb that funding and use it in their program as they see fit. So you need to carefully track your proportionate share. I advise you to ask your business manager to give it a separate accounting code so that it can be tracked and dealt with accordingly. It's an item that is examined in WISM. It's an item that's examined in federal program review, meaning auditors. So it in a large district, it can become a large amount of money. So you need to keep track of that funding. Any questions about this? I know there was a couple people that said, I really want you to talk about proportionate share.
So there was a question, or there is a question about, is the total amount generated in the IDEA application per pupil or total?
It's per pupil times the number to give you the total. And if I wasn't clear on that, send me an email, a questionnaire, and I will take you out to your form package 267 and we'll walk through it. Okay?
Thanks, Mary Ellen.
You bet. Now moving along, did I have any more questions? Oh, well, since we're moving along so quickly, I reviewed the names of the districts. Not the people, but the districts. And I'm thinking that some of you were probably first-year personnel. And so you're going to want to learn what each of these terms are, because when you have your weekly, monthly, biweekly, whatever meeting you have scheduled with your business office, this is the language they speak. So the F-195 is the district's budget. There's an F-195 for every school year. I like to think of it as the district's philosophy expressed in dollars and cents, because it gives the district and the directors, everyone involved in the district to what do we say? Put their money where their mouth is. No, maybe not that, but, and we are being recorded, so you'll want to strike that, Helene. FTE means
Full-time equivalent.
Full-time equivalent. Thank you, Bill. I really do know what these terms mean. S-275 is the report of all the staffing. It's filed as of October 1. What is the picture for all the staffing? What's important about it is that it shows the programs to which an employee is charged. It's not unusual to have someone charged to the program 21 or 24 budget that really shouldn't be. So it's something that you want to carefully, tactfully ask your business office, human resources, whatever, if you can review it from time to just to know that the people that are being charged to your program are in fact performing special ed duties. Finally, I have the F-196, which is the financial statement of the district for the closed school year. So I said to you that I'm waiting for the F-196s for the 17-18 school year. They've all been filed, but they haven't made it to my office yet. So that's some vocabulary. For second-year people, I think that it's important because I know this is such a huge, huge budget issue this year. I think it's important that you get a grasp on what's going on with the tiered multiplier. Are there features, advantages, and benefits to your district? You need to examine and determine, are there? Because the legislature is going to want that feedback. We want it at our office. So please, that would be an assignment that for second year and first year, and those of you who are veterans of many, many campaigns, understand that formula. And now I've got some ABCs. In my life, I've been, what have I done? I've worked for a CPA firm. I've had my own business. I've been a teacher, special ed teacher. I've been a curriculum manager. I've been a business manager. So I put some ABCs here for you. I challenge you to actively engage in the development of the 1920 special ed program budget. I would say, based on enrollment trends, carefully project your coming year enrollment. It's dangerous to underestimate. It's dangerous to overestimate, given the evils of of either I'm thinking that perhaps overestimating might be more problematic than underestimating, because if you've overestimated and hired staffing, you may be overstaffed, and there won't be funding through the state formula for the overstaffing. Just my perspective. Bill's nodding his head, so I think he's in agreement. For C, I would say consult with human resources. Be well aware of the negotiated agreement requirements when you're building your budget, and be well aware of any legislative changes that are going to impact you for the coming school year. And that's why I've been talking excessively about the tiered multiplier. Finally, develop your out-of-district placement contracts. And I have the word competitive contracts for non-employee service providers. This is something you want to be schooled on. It is probably the #1 reason why there are findings by the state auditor's office, because districts have not gone through the procurement process properly. There are specific procedures that must be followed depending on the size, meaning dollar volume of the contract. I put in here competitive because I want you to be aware that writing contracts is a, if you will, almost a negotiating process. And you can put language in the contract that might say, if a student cannot attend, we will not be charged for the nurse, provided we notify within 24 hours, 48 hours. You want to be protective of the district's assets when you're writing these contracts. And then finally, if we're doing A, B, C, D, E, enjoy the new school year that's about to begin. So I know it's December 5th, and you're thinking, why is she talking about budget? But I'm very well aware that in January and February, as the legislature's decision-making process becomes more relevant and a topic of discussion in your school board meetings and in your administrative meetings, that they will be asking you to already be thinking about the coming year's budget. Now, I've got a few things in here just for, might be of interest. If you're having trouble sleeping, you might want to log on to these. The OSPI decision package, with regard to special ed, we do have a safety net maintenance of effort package. We've got the special education multiplier. We've got professional learning days that our our assistant superintendent of special education, Glenna Gallo, was involved in, and the comprehensive supports for all students. And so those decision packages are out there. You might breeze through those to see how they would affect special education. We've got the professional learning days, as I said earlier. What it adds is 3 additional days for state allocated certificated instructional staff and classified staff. There's the amounts and the comprehensive supports for all students. And I think we are at the end. Carefully timed to last an hour. We probably have a few minutes.
Great. Yeah.
Oh,
any
okay.
Questions? Helena, are there any questions?
Yes, Jenny, or maybe more of a statement for us to think about for the next time that we're together in March, but about learning about what kinds of things can be negotiated in contracts. So if that's something, Mary Ellen, I don't know if there's a short answer to that, and or short answer now and then go more deeply into it in the future.
Off the top of my head, I'm thinking contracts are so complicated, it might be good to get somebody from the state auditor's office. Yeah.
That would be complicated.
No. We have program specialists in that area that I can think of a couple people to recommend. Either that, or they probably have a standard PowerPoint and just deliver it. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. You know, while I've got the microphone on, before I turn it back over to Bill, is for those of you who are members of WASA, and or for those of you who follow WASA and are engaged in this academy, I think it's important that you know that the WASA's legislative platform includes a piece about special education. And so there are 4 planks to our platform for this 2019 year. And while we recognize that the legislature increased the special ed excess cost multiplier, which increased per student funding, that the increase itself was minimal. And so that our platform says special education continues to be underfunded, forcing many districts to use limited and decreasing local levy funds to backfill the state's funding gap. So that was just a piece that I wanted to make sure everybody here knew about. So Bill, I'm turning it back over to you, and I'm going to check the chat line in the meantime.
Okay, Mary Ellen has one more item.
I wanted to put a plug in for the monthly webinars offered by the special ed section. You will find those posted in the monthly updates that we circulate to all directors. I want to tell you that next month's topic is fiscal. It is the monthly, or excuse me, it is the risk-based self-assessment, which we prepare for every single district in the state. And it's a real good tool for new directors or incoming directors to review, as it identifies 12 areas which you may want to review because they have fiscal implications for your district. So that's, I believe next month, it's January 9th. It's usually about 3 in the afternoon, so it's not impacting well, we try to have it later in the day, so the directors are available. January 9th, risk-based self-assessment.
Okay, thank you, Mary Ellen. Really appreciate that. Also, just wanted to point out on this slide that she has her contact information, so email and phone number. And I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any other questions that you have, so please send her an email. Any last questions at this point from anybody? How are we doing, Helene?
Great. We have about half a minute. So let me jump in if that's okay. Let me mention to you, as I did in the email yesterday, that the resources that were used today are on our website. This is a short link for that. We'll take a look at the recording of today's session, and we'll get that posted as well. A big thank you to Mary Ellen. You're getting accolades by those who are participating. And Bill, we have the information about the next session.
Okay. So I think we are done. We thank everybody for participating, and we'll see you in March, if not before.
Thanks ever so much, everybody. There is a question. Let me just, is there any conversation by the state to develop an online program like IEP Online at a state level rather than districts having to purchase these types of programs?
The answer would be not that I'm aware of.
So let me mention, as everybody is finishing up, is that any questions, please do send to Bill or to Mary Ellen, Glenna, Tanya, myself, and we'll circulate those with everybody. And again, my sincere thanks. Have a great holiday, everybody.